In the name of Jesus Christ, who is our all in all, dear Christian friends, I think it's safe to say that when you are a Christian, it is your deep desire to make sure that your life and your faith are connected, right? You don't, as a Christian, desire to say, well, I have my faith over here, and this is how I react in my faith, but I have my life over here, and this is how I work in my life. As Christians, your faith and life ought to, God willing, mesh together, right? So that your faith life is just that there is no separation between what you do because you have faith and how you live just in your life. We recognize that because that's really what the Bible does for us in so many ways, and Jesus does for us in so many ways when he teaches. We recognize that God often uses the stuff of our life, and he connects it to our faith, and he brings those things together to say, how's your faith life? How is this all connected? He does that when he talks about relationships between people of families. And he talks about your relationship with your family, but he does so not just in, here's how you relate to your family, but here's how you view and handle your family in relation to your faith, so that you work within your family as your faith goes. Same thing with work. He talks about work, but he says, serve your master as though serving the Lord. See how he does that? He doesn't just say, now work hard. He says, he brings your faith into it and says, this is how it reacts. With your neighbor, he does the same thing. Talks about how you should love your neighbor as yourself. But that's not just the golden rule and a nice moral thing to do. He connects it with your faith, and he says, whatever you do for the least of one of these, you do for me, he says. See how Jesus always connects? He connects your faith in your life using those relationship things that you have around you. He does it with the government too. It's all in there so that the Christian's life and faith work together hand in hand, and that we always, no matter what we're doing in our life, have our faith connected with it. It's true in all those other relationships and areas of life that God has given to us. And it's also true in the relationship that we have with money. Because it's probably true that almost everybody here daily deals in some way with money. It's almost hard to imagine that you don't. In some way deal with money every single day of your life as you walk. And because that dealing with money is such an integral part of just our lives and how we go about, Jesus wants us to make sure, like he does with every other relationship that we have, make sure that that relationship is connected to our faith as well. So that when we're dealing with money, we deal with it in a faith life. And that is what Jesus addresses today from Luke chapter 16, as he helps us understand how we view and handle money and earthly wealth, so that we can understand how we view and handle eternal wealth. So if you look into your bulletins, the entire text is printed for you there. And Jesus, in explaining this and in teaching us about this, does what he does very often, which is he starts with a story, an illustration to help us understand what he's talking about. So, this is what he says. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what should I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 800 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 400. Then he asked the second, "And how much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, "Take your bill and make it 800." The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are people of the light. Let's just stop right there. All right, there's a few things that we need to understand about this story before we actually talk about this story. The first is that Jesus told this story to whom? His disciples. This is not a lesson that you go out and try to convert an unbeliever with. Okay? Let's just be honest right there. Jesus told this to his disciples because he wanted to train them up and help them realize what's really, really important. So this is a big lesson here. Secondly, this is not typically a parable. All right? We talk about parables and we talk about heavenly or earthly stories with heavenly meanings. In parables, generally, you can sort of see yourself and you can see God in parables. Jesus is the good shepherd. We are the sheep, right? God is the sower. The seed is his word. And the soil is all kinds of different people. In parables, you can generally see yourself, see God, and there's that parallelism that goes in there in parables. But sometimes Jesus didn't tell a parable in a way to say, I want you to see yourself, see me in this. And this is one of those times. Jesus is not telling a parable here, he's telling a story. He's giving an illustration. And it's not for us technically to see, all right, God is the rich man, we are the managers, and that type of thing. That's not the point of this story. The point of this story that Jesus says is, I want you to understand how the world works. I want you to understand that how people without faith just live in their lives. And this is how people without faith just live in their lives. This is what the world does and how the world thinks. And so the story goes. There's a rich guy and he's got a manager, and the manager is accused of being dishonest. We're not sure whether or not this man was actually dishonest, or somebody was just accusing him of being dishonest. But the fact of the matter is, the rich man had made up his mind. You're losing your job. I want to see the books. And so this manager goes, oh man, I live in the world and I deal in the world. And in the world, I know that my manager, the rich man, right, doesn't have grace for me. So the rich man is just going to kick me to the curb because that's where I'm living in. So I got a big old problem. I don't want to dig ditches. I can't do that. I'm too old for that. And I'm not going to go out there and beg. I have too much pride for that. So what am I going to do? I'm going to lose my job. All right. I got it. You see, as a man who's working in the ways of the world, I'm going to use the tools that the world has given me in order to make sure that I'm taken care of. So what I'm going to do is cook the books. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cook the books so that the rich man's clients will look at me as a really, really nice guy and a good guy to do business with, so that when the rich man kicks me to the curb, I can maybe set up my own little business and take his clients. See how that works? That's the way the world works, isn't it? Dishonest. To do whatever you can to get ahead. Whether it's immoral or unethical, it doesn't matter because I got to take care of me. All right, so that's the story that Jesus tells about how the world works. Did you notice something though when the rich man came? What did the rich man say? Jesus says he commended the shrewd man for being shrewd. When you live in the ways of the world, here's this rich guy, and he looks and he goes, yep. When you live in the ways of the world, I can only go, boy, that was a rotten thing to do to me, but hey man, you did what you had to do to get ahead. So more power to you, I guess. I let it happen. And that's what happens in the ways of the world. That's all that the rich man could do, was just look at that guy and go, hey, I probably would have done the same thing if I was in your shoes. Whether it's immoral or unethical doesn't make any difference when you're dealing with the ways of the world, just so long as you can get ahead. All right, so that is the story that Jesus tells in order to help us understand what's going on here. And then he starts making some applications for the life of faith. He says, the people of this world are more... the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are people of the light. So what's Jesus saying? He's saying, look at this. It was immoral and it was unethical what this guy did. But at least he understood what to do. He understood that he could make friends for himself in order so that when he got kicked to the curb, he was able to still survive. And so he was willing to use money to his advantage. He was smart enough to use money to his advantage. It was unethical. But that's the way the world works. And he was able to use it to his advantage to make friends for himself. And Jesus says, see, the people of the world get this. They get that you can use money to advantage. But people of the light, Jesus says, don't get this. They don't get, Jesus says, that you can use money while here on earth to win friends in order to have more joy in glory. Whereas the people of the world can only use money unethically and immorally, we as Christians, as people of the light, have the opportunity to use money morally and ethically for a higher purpose, don't we? A person of the world can only use money unethically in order to gain stuff for himself, maybe win some friends for this life and gain stuff for himself. But we as Christians have the opportunity to morally and ethically use money for a much higher purpose, and that purpose is eternal life. And then Jesus continues. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you've not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No servant can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money.